Gothic literature first appeared in Great Britain in the late 1700s. Horace Walpole Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto and Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho were two of the first works to introduce and establish this genre. Castle of Otranto and Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho were two of the first works to introduce and establish this genre. Walpole's novel takes place in the characteristically sinister setting of a medieval castle, while Radcliffe's work employs what became an often used Gothic plot involving a main character who is haunted by eerie sounds and shadows. These authors aim to evoke terror in their readers. As Gothic literature gained international appeal, American authors who is high sounds and knows. These authors aim to evoke terror in their readers. As Gothic literature gained international appeal, American authors began to adopt Gothic elements. The American author Edgar Allan Poe is famous for his Gothic works, such as the influential short story The Cask of Amontillado. Using the Cask of Amontillado as an example, this lesson explores the characteristics and style of American Gothic literature. Before it was a literary genre, the word Gothic described a style of architecture from the Middle Ages. The features of Gothic buildings included solid stone walls, tall pointed ceilings, narrow towers, and stone gargoyle sculptures, all of which provided the perfect setting for frightening tales. From the late 1700s into the 1800s, Gothic novels gained popularity in Europe and then in the United States. These works described mysterious atmospheres with protagonists who became entangled in terrifying, ghastly, and perplexing circumstances. Next, you'll watch a video about the styles, themes, and history of Gothic literature.
The word Gothic first referred to a style of architecture that originated in Central Europe during the Middle Ages. Gothic-style buildings had stout stone walls, high arches, stained glass windows, and sometimes even carved stone gargoyles that gave them an eerie, supernatural look. In the late 1700s, writers began using these spooky buildings, with their secret passageways, towers, and dungeons, as the backdrop for their novels. The creepy setting was ideal for strange happenings. Gothic novels quickly became very popular in Europe. Gothic literature is known for its mysterious atmospheres, in which the protagonist becomes entwined in mysterious and supernatural events, which are made more horrifying by the setting. Some elements of Gothic literature include unreliable and unstable narrators, characters that suffer physical or psychological torment, bleak and remote settings, frightening imagery, gruesome or violent occurrences, and the presence of supernatural forces. America in the late 1700s was home to a vast and mostly unknown frontier where native peoples and wild animals lived. The American perspective on Gothic literature reflected this landscape, becoming a subgenre of Gothic literature known as American Gothic. While similar to European Gothic style, American Gothic is known for some particular elements. For example, the bleak and remote settings of American Gothic literature were not the remote castles of old Europe, but the solitary forests and hills of the American wilderness. In addition, American Gothic literature forests and hills, Europe, but the solitary forests and hills of the American wilderness. In addition, American Gothic literature tended to focus more on Puritan morality, with characters who were tempted by wicked spirits. These spirits came from native mythology, such as shamanism, slave culture such as voodoo, or satanic witchcraft from the Old World. As the Romantic movement grew, American Gothic literature became darker and more sinister, as in Nathaniel Hawthorne's short story, The Minister's Black Veil. The story's protagonist, a devout preacher, suddenly and for no reason begins to wear a black veil to hide his face. Mr. Hooper, a gentlemanly person of about 30, though still a bachelor, was dressed with due clerical neatness, as if a careful wife had starched his band and brushed the weekly dust from his Sunday's garb. There was but one thing remarkable in his appearance. Swathed about his forehead and hanging down over his face, so low as to be shaken by his breath, Mr. Hooper had on a black veil. On a nearer view, it seemed to consist of 2 folds of crepe, which entirely concealed his features, except the mouth and chin, but probably did not intercept his sight, further than to give a darkened aspect to all living and inanimate things. "I don't like it," muttered an old woman, as she hobbled into the meeting house. "He has changed himself into something awful, only by hiding his face." "Our parson has gone mad," cried Goodman Gray, following him across the threshold. The black veil in the story is a symbol of the darker side of humanity, and it creates a sense of suspense and unease in the readers, as well as the townspeople. Because the minister chooses to wear a black veil to hide his face, the townspeople assume something wicked hides behind the veil, or that the minister himself is hiding something from them. Their suspicions are translated to the reader, who is led to assume that something evil is occurring. Actually, Hawthorne is challenging the reader to recognize the ignorant and suspicious nature of the townspeople and their Puritan beliefs. He wants readers to understand that feelings of intolerance and paranoia lead the Puritan townsfolk to believe anyone who behaves outside the norms of society is evil. Hawthorne demonstrates his dislike for this unjust system of belief by portraying the townspeople's unfair condemnation of Mr. Hooper. In the story, Hawthorne uses a common element of Gothic literature, foreshadowing, to create a tense and
Reading selection. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1809. His father abandoned the family soon after his birth, and his mother died when Poe was only 3 years old. He was separated from his siblings and sent to live with John and Frances Allan, a couple from Richmond, Virginia. The Allans raised him. Poe knew from a young age that he wanted to pursue a literary career, but his adoptive father, a wealthy merchant, didn't support Poe's literary aspirations. Against Allan's wishes, Poe moved to Baltimore in his early 20s to write and publish short stories. Soon a success in his chosen career, Poe returned to Richmond to begin a position as an editor for a literary journal, the Southern Literary Messenger, where he wrote and published esteemed literary criticism. The Cask of Amontillado. Over the years, Edgar Allan Poe published a novel, several poems,
gesticulate